There's been a great number of incredible films last year, like Godzilla Minus One, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and so many others. It was also a record-breaking year financially for a lot of movies as well, with billions of dollars being racked up over the course of 2023. But with all the winners comes a few flops. 2023 marked the demise for a lot of movies, some of which were huge names with lots of promise. Whether it be lack of quality, lack of popularity, or lack of marketing altogether, today we'll be taking a look at some of the biggest flops of 2023. We'll be focusing mainly on movies that failed box office wise, but we'll also be taking a look at movies that were just flat out bad. As a rule of thumb, movies have to make about 2.5 times their budget to break even, let alone make a profit, so keep that in mind as we list these off. Before we get started, be sure to hit that sub button to stay up to date with the latest videos just like this. Without further delay, let's get started. First up on the list, we have Disney's feature, The Haunted Mansion. The film starred Rosario Dawson, Owen Wilson, and Danny DeVito, among other names, and is based on the classic ride in Walt Disney World by the same name. They tried making a movie about this ride back in 2003 with Eddie Murphy. It was panned by the audience and critics alike. Fast forward to 20 years later, and they for some reason decided to give this idea another go, but with a more modern twist. While the 2023 version of The Haunted Mansion wasn't universally hated, it failed to garner any kind of hype or buzz and ended up being just an okay movie with forgettable roles and plot lines. The movie was made on a $150 million budget, give or take, and only ended up making $117 million back, making it a financial failure and an overall disappointment. Next up, we have The Machine, starring Mark Hamill and Bert Kreischer. For those not familiar, Bert Kreischer is a comedian and entertainer who gained stardom through his crazy stand-up antics and podcast appearances. His most popular bit involved his retelling of a story where Bert found himself face to face with Russian gangsters on a college trip to Russia way back in the day, and thus the idea to adapt it into a full-length movie was born. It's an exaggerated and over-the-top retelling of his stand-up routine involving a fairly big budget. On paper, this really isn't the best idea and probably wouldn't translate very well on the big screen, and this ended up being exactly the case as the movie was bashed by critics and audiences, and ended up being a box office bomb. It lost $10 million on a $20 million budget. How they were able to snatch Mark Hamill in the movie is beyond me. And as a side note, maybe we shouldn't adapt entire full-length movies from a 13-minute joke. Next up in line, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. As the second installment of the Shazam series, the studio was confident and hopeful that this one would blow out the box office. But as the time came close to its release, many were weary about how the movie would be and how well it would perform, considering all the other movies coming out at that time. Along with Zachary Levi, the film starred some big names like Helen Mirren and Rachel Zegler, among others. On its release, Shazam 2 ended up being the third worst DC film release, behind The Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman 1984. It was considered one of the worst starts for a major Hollywood superhero film. The movie also bombed in China and ended up grossing $134 million on a $125 million budget, which may not be the biggest loss we've seen, but for a superhero movie of this caliber, it was considered a huge loss, even with decent reviews from the audience. Next up, we have a very sad exit for an iconic character, but not in the way you're thinking. Yes, we're talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. As the final movie in the beloved franchise, they absolutely butchered Indy's exit. Not only was Dial of Destiny a financial failure for Disney, but the movie absolutely trashed everything that made the original character great. With overdone gimmicks, cliches, and a constant reminder that Indiana Jones is old and useless, Dial of Destiny failed in so many ways. But glad Phoebe Waller-Bridge's pretentious character, who's good at everything, was able to help our senior citizen hero leave the big screen in style. It's everything wrong with reboots and remakes, and continues to be a constant reminder that quality and clever writing trumps pandering to the audience like we're a bunch of idiots. The movie reportedly ended up losing upwards of $100 million, even though it gained around $384 million worldwide. Yikes. Following the trend of disappointing superhero movies, we have the strange case of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. What was supposed to be a fun and surreal journey ended up being a disappointment. Besides Jonathan Majors' sinister performance as Kang the Conqueror, the movie was strangely paced, poorly made in some parts, and criticized for its lackluster graphics and storytelling. Just look at this. What in God's name were they thinking? The movie was a loss financially as well, despite the mediocre reviews. Disney lost a whopping $125 million and noted that Quantumania was the first MCU film since the pandemic to have actually lost money. But if you stick around, you'll see that more movies would end up joining this list by the end of the year. Next up, we have Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. As one of the most surprising movies of 2023, the movie was actually met with really favorable reviews from the audience and critics alike. It was a fun and unique movie that set out to do something a little different from the norm, and ultimately succeeded. Backed up with names like Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and others, D&D was a critical surprise. But sadly, the same wasn't the case in getting people to the theater. On around a $150 million budget, the movie grossed $208 million worldwide, but still ended up being a loss in the grand scheme of things, sadly. It was a fun movie that just wasn't marketed enough and didn't draw nearly as much of a crowd as it deserved. Now back to our regularly scheduled program featuring Disney's downfall, we have the 2023 animated movie Wish. If I told you that this was the same studio that made movies like Encanto, Zootopia, and Alice in Wonderland, you'd probably laugh at me. Apart from their regular animation style, Wish involves a flat, boring concept art style matched with nostalgia bait that many audience members and critics fail to resonate with, and for good reason. Wish proved to be a big step back for the classic animation studio, and financially speaking, things didn't look much better. On a $200 million plus budget, they only made $209 million back at the box office, which doesn't sound terrible on paper, but doing a little research shows that they lost a lot more on this movie than meets the eye. It failed on several levels and is ultimately another disappointment to add to the list of Disney's decline. I'm sure they were all wishing for a better result. Alright, let's just move on. Taking a break from Disney, because yes, there are more entries from them, we have Renfield, the horror comedy that was released early last year. The film starred Nicolas Cage, Nicholas Hoult, Awkwafina, and other names, and was based around Dracula's servant, Renfield. It was an off-the-beaten-path film that failed to reach mass hype. While many praised the performance of Nick Cage as Dracula in the movie, and the fact that it got decent reviews, it wasn't enough to save the movie from the deadly bite of the general public. The movie was made on an almost $65 million budget and wasn't even able to hit half of that, only amassing $26.9 million. This is a hefty loss and a box office bomb in every sense of the word. But we do have to give them props for doing something a little outside of the box at the very least. Next up, we have one of the highest grossing films of the year, which ironically was also seen as a big financial disappointment. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Tom Cruise is a box office beast. The man knows how to make quality movies while getting people in the movie theater. Off the back of Top Gun: Maverick and the previous MI films, Dead Reckoning Part 1 was anticipated to be another big win. However, this didn't happen as they expected. As far as the reception, it was received with high acclaim, once again solidifying why the MI series is one of the best action franchises still out today. While I personally didn't like it as much as the previous movies, it was still an excellent addition to the franchise and involved jaw-dropping special effects and stunts as always. The movie was made on a $290 million budget, plus another $100 million or so for marketing, and made back $567 million worldwide. While this is a success in some senses, sources show that MI ended up losing $100 million once everything was said and done, showing that this was sadly a financial disappointment. Going back to the superhero realm, we have DC's The Flash. In an awkward twist of fate, the buzz surrounding the new Flash was riddled with Ezra Miller's controversial actions outside of the big screen. Warner Brothers was placed in an unfavorable position from the get-go, but after many ups and downs, the film was finally released, and the outcome was hanging in the balance. The budget was around $220 million, and what came back was around $270 million. This doesn't sound terrible, but with everything factored in, it's considered one of the worst financial flops in recent time, losing hundreds of millions of dollars in the process of its production and release. In my personal opinion, the movie wasn't that bad. I thought there was a lot of charming parts to it, and a lot of things that I found unique and that were well executed, but critics and audience members alike were disappointed by the film and sealed its fate for the foreseeable future. Wow, there's been a lot of superhero movies on this list. Wait, there's one more? Rounding off this list of biggest box office bombs of 2023, we have The Marvels. Not sure what the demographic for this one was, or who asked for it, but it's no surprise that this movie failed utterly in getting people to come out to the theaters. This female-led superhero flick followed Captain Marvel and two other characters as all their powers get intertwined and they ultimately have to end up working together to save the universe. What a unique plot. Apart from the semi-unique aspect of their overlapping powers, the movie really didn't deliver much. But once the financial numbers came back, Disney was wishing they could switch places with any of the other movies on this list. The movie was made on a $270 million budget and only grossed around $205 million worldwide. When all was said and done, it was a huge bust for the studio and secured its spot as the lowest grossing MCU movie ever up until this point, beating out 2008's movie The Hulk. What an absolute joke. Well, there you have it, just some of the biggest box office busts. It's a shame to see some of the movies on this list because some of them are actually really good, while others are quite deserving to be on this list. So, if you like this content and want to see more, please be sure to hit that sub button and turn on notifications to stay up to date with the latest videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for the support, and I'll see you on the next video.